All right, today's lesson is pre-flight inspection. Reference today is the Airplane Flying Handbook, and our key elements on this lesson are going to be the aircraft specific checklist, airworthiness, and the PAVE checklist, the fuel grade, contamination, and oil level. From the private ACS, we know that there's some risks with not doing a proper pre-flight inspection. So we're going to talk about some generic pre-flight inspection things that you're going to do on any airplane. And then after this is done, we will go out to the plane and do an actual pre-flight inspection. First elements that I'll talk about in this presentation are the reasons for the pre-flight inspection, the checklist, the pre-flight overview, what to inspect, detecting the problems, ice and frost, and loading and securing and determining the airplane safe. I've got my PTS right here, which has the elements that I'm supposed to cover for the CFI check ride, and you can see I've got those covered. Wish I had my PTS right now. It takes about 10 minutes. This is the 10-minute overview, though if you read the GLIME CFI maneuver manual, this lesson, the way they present it, takes about 30 minutes. So this is more of the 10-minute overview from Backseat Pilot. But again, we can reference that GLIME book for any questions that our students have, which flushes out each element of this even more so. Okay. The equipment we'll need is just whiteboard and markers and our reference material. I'll be doing the lesson. I'll present the lecture. Feel free to ask questions throughout any point of this lecture. And the homework for this is read Airplane Flying Handbook and to give me a summary of the subheadings in there. Okay, so the completion standard. The completion standard for a private or a commercial or any type of pilot is to be able to go around the aircraft and in the cockpit and look for anything that might be a showstopper on the flight. We want to have a comprehensive pre-flight inspection, understand what to look for during the inspection, and also the paperwork side of it, the airworthiness, the AERO acronym that we use. Any questions? No? Okay. So, I mean, I feel a little awkward doing this, but at the same time I can see, okay, if I was the DPE or a student, I kind of got this. So the introduction, an interesting attention or grabbing story. Rod Mashad tells about a pilot that he knew of in Southern California who jumped in his plane and went to the ran up the plane. There's a plane he owned with another partner. Got on the runway, gave it full throttle, went to rotate, nothing happened, went through the fence at the end of the runway, jumped out, looked at his plane, and didn't have an elevator on his plane. His partner had taken off the elevator to paint it or fix it or something, and of course didn't have a great flight because of that, went right through the fence. In my own personal life, I've had a time where I came down super hard on an Aero 1, popped a bunch of rivets up in the sky, broke the pitot tube that connected the tube that connects the pitot tube to my airspeed indicator, and didn't realize that I actually had a problem until my next flight with my next student when we were about to rotate and looked down and noticed we had no airspeed. So we aborted that takeoff, took it back, did a much more thorough pre-flight inspection, and realized, yeah, that last landing where we landed super hard on the one wheel, that actually shot a bunch of rivets up in the sky. So everybody's prone to it. I probably had 1,000 hours at that time. And actually I only had about 300 hours at that time. But anybody at any time could benefit from the pre-flight. I was flying with a Delta captain the other day. First thing he did when he hopped in the plane was, or SkyWest captain, he said, let me see the airworthiness and the registration. He made me dig it out, and I thought that was great. Like, what a pro. So I found it. It was right where it should be, showed it to him, and he was satisfied once we'd sort of covered all that stuff. So that was interesting to see him be so gung-ho. Anyways, not gung-ho, just following the rules. So there's my attention-grabbing story. So what? The pre-flight inspection is just a thorough check of the airplane to ensure airworthiness and safety prior to flight. Why are we doing this? If we want to accomplish a safe flight, it begins with careful pre-flight inspection. We got to determine that the airplane is legally airworthy and it's in a condition safe for flight. Okay, camera 2. Very high tech. Is this my good side? Reasons for the pre-flight inspection. We're going to determine the airplane has no obvious problems before takeoff. Checklist. Each airplane has a specific pre-flight procedure designed by the manufacturer. It's in section 4 of the POH. Now we're going to use a different checklist, and that's going to result in missing equipment and confusion. So a lot of people will take like a 172P model checklist and use it for a 172S model, and there's major differences. There's a carburetor in one and not in the other. Various things like that could sort of result. Avionics is another one that might get missed, so always use the one from your actual make and model. Common errors: failure to use or improper use of a checklist. One of the things you can do is kind of start in the same place and go all the way around, and then at the end, after you've done sort of like a look, then look at your checklist and be like, did I remember everything? Nope, I forgot to sump the tanks or something like that. That's totally fine to do. You don't have to go one at a time and just like, I mean, at first you have to, like, okay, I'm going to check here, I'm going to check there, but you know, it's fine to do like a flow checklist as well. We got to ensure all the necessary items for a specific airplane are checked in a logical sequence. They are not just a crutch for poor memory. So next, in regards to checklist, we always have the checklist to be used as a reference to ensure everything is used. Now, hazards which may result from allowing distractions to interrupt an inspection. What can happen is you can get like the fuel truck will show up, you'll deal with the fuel, and then you'll move on and sort of like skip some stuff on your checklist. So it's always a good idea to just sort of like, you know, use your thumb or something, just remember where you are. Distractions result in missing items or not recognizing a discrepancy. If you're distracted, start at the beginning or repeat the preceding 2 or 3 items. The overview here. The pre-flight will logically move around the plane in order to ensure it's in a condition for safe flight. It's going to begin while approaching the airplane on the ramp. You're going to make note of the appearance, same as you would a boat. You know, you're getting closer and closer to the boat, walking down the dock. You'd be like, that boat's not seaworthy, I'm not jumping in that thing. We can see the plane is tilted from one side to the next, or there's a big puddle underneath it, or there's snow or ice or something on it. Or just generally, you'll have a sense of, is this airplane good to go? It looks like it's been sitting for a while. You're going to check extra well for little wasp nests and stuff inside the holes that can be there. Let's see, we were just talking about the overview. Begins on the ramp, note the appearance, obvious problems, gear out of alignment, structural distortion, skin damage, dripping fuel, oil leaks, that sort of thing. So you kind of want to be in sterile cockpit mode, walking out to the plane, getting your first view of this thing. Remove all the tie downs right away, control locks and chocks, just get all that stuff up and off. Then what to inspect. First, we're going to go inside the cockpit. So I'm talking to you kind of like you're a brand new pilot, which of course is what the DPEs want. They want to be talked to like they're a little private, and they like to see kind of your flow. Of course, if I was really prepared for this, I'd have like a nice whiteboard or something where I'm going around. Or some sort of, every once in a while, have some questions built in, so you're not just sitting there passively, but I'm just kind of doing this from the hip here to check the box. But it does give us a sense of what it's like to watch this, presentation without the preparation. So anyways, inside the cockpit, we're going to look for airworthiness, the required documents, airworthiness registration, POH, and the weight and balance for that make and model. Then we're going to make sure the logbooks. Of course, at some point with our students, we'll actually look at the logbooks and ensure that the required tests and inspections have all been completed. Those aren't kept in the cockpit. We're going to look for the mode seat transponder, any required equipment, the radios, inspect the items inside the airplane like the instruments, the switches, the mixture, just like it's described on the checklist. Then we'll go outside, we'll inspect everything outside the plane, the structures, the controls, the engine, the prop, the gear, the struts, everything that's on the checklist. Watch for detects. They're going to be detected by following the checklist and looking for something wrong in each of them. And common error here is inability to recognize discrepancies or determine airworthiness. And that comes with experience. I'm still to this day learning how to properly inspect a tire and the brakes to make sure that I've got enough tread on there, enough padding on there, or if it's good to go, A nasty bald spot one day or no tread one day could be a factor. On another day, it's no big deal. So we learn from experience and Google and stuff on the spot, calling in maintenance when we need to. If you do see something, there's usually a protocol at your flight school to get a more experienced opinion on it. We're going to look for visible. So part 5 here, I'm going to talk about so we just talked about what to inspect. Part 5 here, detecting problems. We'll talk about visible structural damage, the flight controls, the fuel quantity, the contamination, and oil quantity and contamination, some common errors, and some leaks that we might come across. So under detecting problems, visible structural damage, we want to check for dents, cracks, tears, anything that can affect airplane performance. Now if there's a missing, say the cowling's held on by 36 lock nuts. If one of those is missing, I'm probably not going to go maintenance. I'll probably just do the flight. If 3 in a row are missing, I'm going to go find maintenance and be like, hey, I'm missing a bolt right here. So there's kind of a, you learn as you go what's airworthy and what's not. Let's see, the Diamond aircraft cannot be flown if a dent is found because of its type of construction. We got to check for leaks and for stains. They're a sign of potential problems. This would be a great place for a picture. I actually honestly recommend building a slideshow for this because so much of it's visual and so much of it's new for the student. I'm sure I've got a lesson on this somewhere where it's like, okay, backseat pilot's information mixed with my quick pictures that I found on Google or of the actual sport cruiser makes this a heck of a lot more interesting. But here we are, and that's fine. We want to look for missing rivets, bolts. This is still great information. Rivets, bolts, etc., and inspect the propeller for nicks and cracks. Flight controls. Ensure the flight controls move freely, correctly, they're attached securely and properly. We're going to inspect the balance weights. We don't have any balance weights. Oh, actually, in the ailerons, there's those little flutter weights. Have you ever seen those in some airplanes? Mm-hmm. So what they do is they've got the aileron will go up and down, and on the last 4 inches of the aileron, they'll have some weights in there. They just look like little rectangular pieces of metal, and it helps so it doesn't flutter and vibrate. Evidently, if those aren't there, it can flutter and vibrate so much that it's disruptive and can also help you can lose control. So you have to, when you peek underneath, you just have to make sure those don't fall out. You'll see them usually on the ailerons. As well on the ailerons and on the flaps, you of course make sure all the nuts and bolts and the cotter pins are in there, but also you'll make sure that the actuator arms, have a little bit of play in them. I can't remember if on the Sport Cruiser if they have a little actuator arm that you can kind of rotate back and forth and see if it's not stiff. I've actually caught those on planes before where people have put so much control pressure on that flight control that it'll sort of dogleg that, and it won't be that, it won't really work that well, and you want to go get that fixed. Good thing to look for. So that's the flight controls. Can you think of anything else on the flight controls you got to check? Nuts, bolts, cotter pins, just generally. A lot of times they'll paint on there so you can see that the bolt hasn't shifted because I actually like to wiggle the whole wing. Are you a wing wiggler? Where you grab the wing, wiggle it just forward, up and down, just make sure none of those 5 bolts that hold it to the fuselage have worked loose a little bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of an old school thing to do. Check the flap movement and the condition. Fuel quantity and contamination. We're going to confirm the fuel quantity indicated on the gauge, a visual reference. If you can get a dipstick that you could make your own dipstick, or you could buy a manufacturer's dipstick on, so you could sort of get a sense of if the gauge is actually, showing the proper indication. I happen to know on a Sport Cruiser 8 and 8 gallons matches up with a Piper 20-gallon tank for 8 gallons. It's the only one that happens to match up, but I know if I've got a 2-hour flight and I stick in my Piper 20-gallon tank and I see 8, and then the inside gauge says 8, I'm good to go. I don't know for any of the other numbers, but I happen to know that one. So you can, get little methods like that. A lot of people just sort of know on the wall of the gas tank, what corresponds. And then if they ever saw one day, it was like, wait, what does that inside gauge say? That looks different than the other 15 planes, where I know it should be sort of at that level. You get a sense for that. We're going to look for the color of the fuel. We're going to make sure that after we sump the tanks that there's no water or sediments. And we're never going to substitute a lower grade of fuel for a required higher grade of fuel. In other words, 80 is red. You'd never use that when you needed the 100 low lead blue. It's going to cause detonation. All right. Oil quantity and contamination. How many pilots do you know that have never checked the oil in the sport cruiser? For a long time, the pilots weren't allowed to check the oil or to add oil. Have you come across pilots like that?
No, I think most people are checking it.
That's good.
Yeah.
For the first couple of years, we only let maintenance do it because it was so easy to overfill. Where we all came over from the Cessna world, this much on the dipstick was a whole bottle in the Cessna, so everybody was putting a whole bottle in, and it was spilling onto the firewalls. Now it seems like everybody at the private and commercial and instrument level in the sport cruisers knows how to burp their engine and put just a little 100 milliliters or 2 of oil in. We're going to check for oil contamination. Do you know where to find the oil in the POH? On most POHs, the sport cruiser sadly doesn't have it in its POH, but you know which section 1 through 8 tells you the oil grade that your plane can normally fly with. You came up through the sport cruiser world, so you may not have caught that during your slim time in the Diamond sport. The Diamond.
It'd be like section 2.
It's actually, that's a good guess.
Or
It's 8. 8 is where you'll find it. They'll have for this temperature range, you can use this weight of oil. Most flight schools will just have somebody will take he'll print it, stick a knife in it on the wall, and say for these tail numbers use this grade of oil. So you kind of just learn on the job training. But if you're ever out and about and you don't know, or you're some pilot shop somewhere trying to decide what oil to buy in some far-flung location, you can check out pilot section 8 of any POH usually, and it'll be this plane takes 15 W50.
Okay.
Same with the tire PSI, if you're ever wondering what that is too. So let's see, check the oil level on the dipstick, ensure it's acceptable amount. The plane will use a small amount each flight. If a large amount is used, there may be a problem. Contamination can be detected by any discoloration. Common error, failure to ensure servicing with the proper fuel and oil. Always drain a sample of the fuel to ensure the correct fuel is being put in. When adding oil, ensure it is the type called for in the POH. Now, lastly, we want to talk about leaks. Fuel, oil, hydraulic. Check to see there are no leaks under the airplane, including the cowling or the wheel struts. Fuel vent may appear to be a leak, but its purpose is to allow for air into the tank or vent excess fuel, depending on the pressure differences. So you'll probably, one hot summer day, somebody will fill the tanks all the way to the top on some plane you're going to fly, and it'll heat up inside the wing as the day gets warmer and warmer, and it'll start to spill out of the air vent, like in the 172, you'll see this, and you'll have this big blue puddle under the wing, and you go to fly, and you're just like, are we dripping gas, But it's most likely just that the full tank is expanded with the heat, and it's made to come out that oil. Same thing underneath your oil. A bunch of oil in the belly of the plane, and that's normal. Someone's just put a little too much oil in, and it's just come out that hose at the bottom. Ice and frost. So the last things we're going to talk about here, just to kind of tell you where we are on this all. Ice and frost, we'll talk about loading and securing our baggage and cargo, and then determining overall if the airplane is safe. Ice and frost, so a small amount of ice and frost can disrupt the airflow over the wing, increasing stall speed and reducing lift. Do not fly unless the ice and frost is removed from the airfoil. You can use a heated hanger, you can spray the de-ice compounds, you can scrape it off, set it in the sun, anything it takes. Loading and securing, ensure everything is in its place and secure. You don't want items flying around in flight from turbulence. Center of gravity can be affected if things move during flight, and movement of heavy items can damage your aircraft. Common error is failure to ensure proper loading and securing of the bags. So in the sport cruisers, we actually have those little straps. They're not used that much, but you could throw your bag under that and cinch it down. Or we should all probably have like a cargo net that if we were going to go up there and there wasn't something adequate like that, a couple of beaners and a cargo net could be the difference between, some bag hitting you in the back of the head when you're trying to fly a plane through turbulence. So overall, determining the plane is safe. Note any discrepancies during the pre-flight, make sound judgments. The PIC is responsible to determine that the airplane is actually airworthy and safe. If you have any doubt, ask someone with more experience. Do not attempt a flight if you're uncomfortable or not completely satisfied the plane is safe. A couple last common errors or things to think about. Failure to use or using an improper checklist. Hazards which result from allowing distractions to interrupt a visual inspection. The inability to recognize discrepancies or determine airworthiness. Failure to ensure servicing with the proper fuel and oil, and failure to ensure proper loading and securing of bags. In conclusion, this was a brief review of the main points. If we make it a big deal to always check all the components of the plane before every flight, every single time, every time do it right, then we won't be one of those people who was caught in a bad situation. Any questions?
I think that was a good lesson.
I think it is. It's just like, okay, this is a big deal. Don't get complacent. Don't be like me and accidentally let a tail strike get caught by the DPE after you. Did I tell you my Julie story? So freaking go out there, and I'd let my CFI student do the pre-flight, and it was 607 Sierra X-ray. Somebody had tail struck it earlier that day or earlier that week. A bunch of us flew in it and didn't, catch it. So my flight got over with, and the guy that had flown it before us came back out to fly it again. And he goes, "Oh, by the way, did you guys notice that damage in the back of the plane?" And I looked at my CFI applicant, and I was like, "Did you notice that when you took off the tie down?" Because I usually just get out there and I'll check the fuel, the oil, the tires, just like a general quick walk around. Well, I usually do the walk around. I'd gotten complacent and just checked on that flight the oil, the fuel, and the tires. And I was like, "No, did you?" And he goes, "No." And so he goes back there by the tie down to tie it down. And of course, there's this chunk out of the plane, there's like that plastic piece that hangs down, and there's this nasty chunk out of it, like somebody had come in and tail struck the thing. And I'm like, "Dude, I trusted you to do that." And I was mad at myself too for not catching it. And so anyways, we called so honestly, I've seen enough planes that have had a whack. There's a couple out there now that I was like, I don't know, someone just kind of dragged it, maybe doing a soft fill takeoff or something. And no big deal. I'm sure maintenance has looked at it. I'm sure that it's no big deal. It's just that plastic piece. This thing's made to take the blow, so the main structure doesn't, was kind of my mindset. Come to find out, Julie, the DPE, was supposed to be in the check ride with this kid. She was like, "I don't know, can we get maintenance to look at it?" So maintenance comes out. Maybe it was because it was the first time they'd seen it. They grounded the plane, and then they ended up taking the elevator and rudder off and replacing some of the ribs of the structure back there. So it was a bad enough chunk that somebody had come in, I don't know, rotated 8 feet high and sunk it down into the ground and did a kathunky type of a landing and did serious damage to that thing. It wasn't just kind of a bump or something on a soft field. So another complacency story for me. As a CFI, freaking didn't do my little walk around either. I just sort of checked the gas, oil, and tires, because that's what a lot of my CFIs have done. It was like, they'll unscrew the fuel tank, look in there, "Oh yeah, we got some gas." Check the oil, yep, oil looks good. Tires are decent, hop in the plane and go, knowing the student's done the full walk around. So it sort of made me think, okay, every flight, I'm gonna do a pretty good little flight inspection myself, even if I'm running late, even if I'm one of those days where I'm hopping plane to plane, always 20 minutes late because I'm a CFI, trying to squeeze in a little bit for the last guy and then starting a little late with the next person, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've never had a CFI, I'm sure, just hop in a plane and be like, sorry, I'm late, let's go. Yeah, and so we got to stop that as this generation of CFIs just be like, hold on, sorry, it's just going to take me 5 minutes, but I'm going to do my own little CFI pre-flight inspection here. We got our papers, okay, good, how's everything looking? I got to be a little bit more, and since that day I've been a little bit more like Julie, the DPE, and sort of taking that seriously. Okay, camera 2, so